We are recording.
All right. So hello, everyone. This is the June 18th bi-weekly SIG Release meeting. This is a meeting that is recorded and on the internet for posterity, so please be mindful of what you say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which is, as Claire says, is tantamount to don't be a jerk. So let's get started. We've got a few things on the agenda, including, I think the first thing that we should cover is for release team members that are on the call. Let's talk really quickly about where we stand with the release and any action items for either later today or tomorrow.
As far as I know, we are just waiting on word from SIG Scalability tomorrow to give us the latest diagnostics from their side.
All right. And as we're going through the meeting, if anyone is interested in taking notes or willing to take notes, because I'm going to gap a lot, feel free to, it would be appreciated. So the SIG scalability, that's a 12-hour test. We're supposed to hear back from them by tomorrow morning, right? Okay. That said, we were also figuring, we mentioned on the burn down call earlier that this should be a topic for the release retrospective. I was chatting with Christine and she was wondering if this is something that we should push back and delay the release retrospective depending on the results. I think that we should hold it in place until we know for sure what's going on, and I think that we'll find that out tomorrow. If we determine that the tests are something that are going to block us for longer, or we need to determine some fix, or scalability needs to determine some fix, then potentially we're looking at next week. But right now, let's pretend like we're safe, right?
That works for me.
Any more comments on that one? We can speed through this agenda.
Nope.
Cool. All right, so the next one is the removal of the test info role from the release team starting in 1.16. So I think we've been moving at good pace on doing that stuff. We have most of it documented. I've seen PRs open to update the relevant handbooks, right? So for those who are not aware, the test info role has been mostly automated away, which is awesome. I think that should be the goal for a lot of these roles where possible. So the remaining duties of the test info role are transferring to the branch manager position and the and bug triage. So I think we're still working out some of the details of what is being moved into bug triage, but there are open PRs across. I think I reviewed the one for bug triage, and there is a branch manager one open. Comms had an update. I think the comms update was signed off on, and there might be one more that I'm missing. Feel free to call it out if I'm forgetting something. So one of the questions is, are there any concerns from SIG release? I personally don't have concerns. I think it's awesome that we're doing it. I think that it's awesome that we've gotten to the point where we can do it. But I'll also shut up now.
I'm a worrywart, and I worry we're putting too much responsibility in a smaller set of people. I wish the test info role currently was a more proactive readout on the health of test infrastructure. But we'll see if that is a problem over time, and if so, we'll figure out how to make sure we have that within the team in the process.
I mean, it really hasn't been for several release cycles, and instead the focus has been on that being the responsibility of SIG testing and the standing test infra team instead of the release team members. the so in other words, if we wanted to make it that role, we would have to get people to buy into it. And the thing is, the people who would need to do that, at least for the first cycle, would be the people who are already on the test infra standing, committee. So,
or SIG testing, who is given the +1 to this, so they're comfortable with the direction of it. So
yeah.
SIG testing has entered the call.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yes to whatever. Yes to whatever somebody just said. Probably.
Oh, you're gonna do it all then? Okay, cool. Everything's solved.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, it's done. Don't worry, I got it.
We were talking about removal of the test info role from the release team and whether that leaves a gap on proactive reporting of test infra status into the release team. But everybody pretty much is comfortable with that not being something that was tracked super closely anyway lately. So if it becomes an issue of a gap, we will address it in the future. But in the meantime, I think everybody's ready to say that the primary tasks are automated.
Yay, kill it with fire. Fewer people doing less toil because of more tools and better dashboards and automation.
Yay. All right, cool. We sound happy. We sound happy-ish. We sound tentatively happy. All right, so the release 115 retrospective, we've tapped Christine, who is on the call, who's been showing up to the SIG PM meetings and overall interested in SIG PM. We figure it's time to finally give Jace a break on doing the retro emceeing. So welcome, Christine, to the call, and thank you for picking that up.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So the retro doc is linked in the meeting notes. Please, if you are on the release team, if you're around the release team, if you have touched anything for 115 and you have opinions about how we've been doing things, please drop notes on the retro doc. The retro is scheduled to happen this Thursday, June 20th, at the community meeting. So that's 1 p.m. Eastern, and shift for your time zones appropriately. The retrospective usually ends up getting broken into 2 sessions, one of which that is held at the community meeting, and the second of which is held at what we try to make the next SIG release meeting, so it'd be like 2 weeks after that. Yeah, that's all I got there. Any questions, comments, concerns? All right.
So we briefly earlier said, like, should we delay? And so I kind of feel like because we normally often span multiple meetings, if there's other things that happen in this coming week, then we can follow up with a focused analysis of those things. And I suspect, given the state of discussion around what's going on this week, we were going to do that anyway, even beyond the retrospective. So we need to get a better handle on how we interact as a release SIG with the scalability SIG.
Yeah, so I'd mentioned that to Christine and Jace too, that like I think we should have it anyway, regardless of whether we release. Yeah, but yeah, it is going to be continuing discussion. I know that Aaron may have some opinions. I know there was a thread going on regarding like revert approvers in SIG scalability, and that their charter dictates certain things, but also that SIG scalability is under-resourced, I guess is the right term for it, or they don't have the right coverage at times. So Aaron, if you have opinions too.
What am I supposed to have an opinion on today? I always have opinions on. Sorry, I heard scalability, but I want to be specific. What context are we talking about here?
We really just talked about 2 that I think are conflated. One, we have an issue this week, and we can carry on with the retrospective, I think, because 99.9% of this release is done. We can discuss all of the things related to that.
Okay.
Bigger picture is, in addition to the 115 release being delayed, there's this other discussion around how and why does SIG scalability gate the release and how can we improve that process. I think that, yes, that came up in 115, but it's also come up in multiple other releases. It's been a late risk often.
Yeah,
I think we can discuss that separately.
Take a look at every retrospective ever. I think the compromise that I tried to suggest on the particular, at least on the core DNS thing that seemed like it was our blocker, I don't know what our blocker is right now, was that in times past, SIG Scalability was chartered to create a report that said that they had validated that a given release of Kubernetes met their SLOs. And this report included like a description of how they stood the cluster up and any deviations from the standard in this cluster, which was my recommendation for how they said like perhaps they should use a different version of core DNS that was like known to work at scale, whereas the newer version of core DNS that's used by default, not quite known to work at scale. That to me is like one workaround for how we could get there. And I mean, I've certainly discussed how I feel like the scalability jobs do not meet the criteria to be like hard release blocking. They're in a board called informing because they're slow or they don't meet the criteria that we as a community have established for blocking. Now, I'm sure they differ in opinion from me that they're informing and not blocking. But I think that's really a conversation we as a community need to have.
Yeah, so what I had mentioned on the burn down is if we're going to say that SIG scalability is going to block on their tests, like they should also be following the criteria for release blocking jobs, right? And those tests should be in the release blocking dashboards.
Like generally, we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole. Generally, when this comes up, I always, when SIG scalability's slow test comes up, I always try to figure out like, how could we have caught this sooner with a faster test? Could we have tuned it to be like more aggressive with its thresholds or whatever? And so like we do have like, I think 100 node test that's in the release blocking dashboard. You know, how could we tune it to be like more aggressive to get us the signal that we need in the requisite, what is it, hour and a half or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
One thing I've asked SIG scalability for a while, but I haven't been willing to participate in actually implementing it, so it hasn't happened, is to have accessible trending information. Because we don't have it, I can't prove that this is the case, but it's quite possible that, well, this problem didn't trip the threshold of the 100 node test. We might have seen a blip in 100 node test of increased latency that didn't quite trip the threshold. And right now we're not getting that information.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel like this is all great stuff
Yeah.
in retro.
Yep.
Cool.
I still partly feel like we should separate it and have it as a formal focus area because I think it's going to take longer than just the retro to resolve. And I think, like, for a while I've wanted to attend a SIG scalability meeting, but as best I can tell, they've had one this year. So, like, I would guess they're not going to attend the retro. So I feel like we need to make it a focus where we create a meeting to talk to them and figure out.
So it sounds like it's less. I'm not saying that it's entirely not our problem, but it sounds like it's less our problem and more maybe a governance problem. I'm just going to leave that in the air. And
yeah, I would suggest please knock on steering's door maybe and say that like this SIG doesn't seem to be meeting its responsibilities, and let's have that conversation.
Yep, sounds good. All right, so like Aaron said, let's not rat hole too much on this. And looks like we have a new attendee. I don't know the context around this one, but the Google Cloud Platform Kate's Cluster Bundle.
Me. Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I usually hang out in SIG cluster lifecycle, but I was chatting with Aaron, so I just thought I'd raise awareness of this project we've been working on. So this isn't part of CNCF yet, but I can see it migrating there. And so the cluster bundle is a project, I can present if you want, but the cluster bundle is a project to provide a lightweight packaging mechanism for Kubernetes objects. And it's something we developed for GKE and GKE on-prem. And it's something we're starting to explore using for COPS and a couple other tools. So I don't know how much interest there is, but that is something that we found a lot of use in, at least internally at Google, for releasing Kubernetes as like a distribution. So
do you have like a little demo presentation? I would like to.
I was going to say, yeah, I'd like to see if you've got like, can you do it in under 10?
I can sure try. I did have a demo that I presented for SIG cluster lifecycle that I can repurpose. Let me just present real quick.
Cool. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah. Let me just give me a sec.
Yeah, I suggested Josh can't come over here to talk about this because he gave a really awesome presentation at KubeCon Barcelona called How GKE Releases GKE, which Stephen and myself and some other folks couldn't attend because I also had a panel at the same time. They always save the best stuff for last.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see, share. And I'll first present just the site itself. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
So kind of the idea that we came up with when we went through a lot of iterations was we decided to kind of like customize actually, but with a little bit different focus. We decided to base everything on CRDs. So at the core of it is this kind of very simple CRD that wraps CRDs. So, and really what it's providing is it's just a versioned, named bunch of objects. So these are all unstructured objects. And it comes with a CLI to manage these things. And kind of like Kustomize, these were kind of developed at a little bit of the same time with a slightly different focus. And we're actually looking to integrate with Kustomize as a plugin, especially once that settles down. Kind of like Kustomize, it builds ultimately what we call like an inline component that we can ship around and combine together into multiple components that make up a distribution. So I think the most interesting thing is it ships with this CLI. So I'll do this right now. So here we are. Let's see. Do you see
your terminal? No.
Yeah, my terminal. You do not. Okay, I have to reshare. Stop share and then reshare terminal. Okay. All right. How about now?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So here we are on my cluster bundle project. And let me install cluster bundle. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, cue the Jeopardy music.
Come on, go. I thought this was surefire.
Demo gods.
Yeah.
Oh man, come on. This is like such a lame part to. All right, there we
Yay.
go. Okay. So I have a couple examples of kind of just that show kind of what we're thinking about how it works. So one is a cluster example, which has like a bunch of different objects. And so what we do is we have this builder file, and if we our bundle control, we can go build -f bundle control, blah, 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 and you can see it combines everything together into a single kind of unit that we can ship around. It also comes with other tools that I find useful, but might be a little bit less interesting, which is you can filter on, let's see, objects, maybe it's objects, let's see. What's the format that I graded? Let's see, pines equals. I am not going to do that right now. It's been a while. Okay, so let's take a look at something else. So I think one thing that's really powerful about this idea of everything is CRDs is we took a look at, well, Go templating. Helm has kind of this Go template idea, but we just made like a CRD that was like a Go templating CRD, which was like, it's very simple. So we have this, and actually, instead of just using normal Go templates, we apply them like customize as patches. So here we have, this is an etcd example, and it comes with some patch templates. And you can see that there's kind of two parts. There's like an option schema that uses the options format developed by CRDs. It's the OpenAPI schema. And then there's just a template. And so if we apply this all together, and actually I wrote myself a README so I remember how to do this. So control. Let me just copy that out so I don't screw it up. All right. So we take that input component and we take an options file, and then it'll spit out the completed options once it runs.
Go is Google's programming language, and it works perfectly within Google. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there it goes. There it goes. So you can see that we have now our completed component, and well, you can't see it because of I think that is it the namespace? Yeah, there we go. The namespace has been added in. So that was using it was a Go template
The templates, the patch
that was
template.
detemplatized, and then it was patched on top of it. And so that's how we're doing GK and GK on-prem. Is we have these like little patch templates that get applied at runtime.
Cool.
All right, so that's kind of the whole idea. And really the part that I'm like really bullish about promoting is kind of this very basic format, because that's like a really nice interchange. Once we can like speak to something that is a bunch of versions of these objects, then it's much easier to write tooling on top of it. The patching mechanism, there's even like a JSON thing. That's sort of like a take it or leave it thing. The customization, I call it, or rendering. And that's the cluster bundle.
Yeah, I would think this group is would probably be most interested in the bundling part, where you take all the version components and you produce a bundle that's like, okay, this is a Kubernetes release for all these things. There are definitely a bunch of patching tools, and this is a pretty neat one, but the part that's probably super interesting here is that like you could imagine doing this upstream and saying, instead of all the stuff that's in the cluster dir, we have like all those add-ons and stuff, we could write them like this and have like officially bundled up. Here's Kubernetes 1x, and it has your etcd and core DNS and everything.
Right, exactly. And one of the things we're doing internally, which is like quite a bit more complicated, and I don't have an example of this yet, is we actually have a dependency resolution system that's built into this. So we have like basically requirements, which is again, very simple. It's basically like a Go mod style requirements. So we actually have a bunch of these components together, and we have some requirements. We can say like, oh, for Kubernetes 1.14, just go to your component repository, grab all these things, and assemble me a list of these components. And that gets us out of the world of having to manage, like, for 1.14, we have this list of components. For 1.14.1, we have this list of components, so on and so on.
We are trying to solve that problem right now.
I guess I was going to ask, like, so I'm seeing things like etcd and API server and stuff like that. Does this also support the ability to describe like the different add-ons or whatever that are used, like the version of core DNS, for example?
Core DNS or Kubernetes CNI, CRI tools, things like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, since it's just unstructured objects, it supports anything. I mean, right now in GK, we're using it to do both add-ons and the core control plane stuff. And we're also starting to use it for even other more esoteric things like images. Like we have a CRD for representing OS images and a CRD for representing cube config, environment config, or like startup scripts, just because it's like a very nice generic way to version configuration.
Okay. Wow. This is really cool. Tim, you and I.
There's a couple of things that resonate for me within this, and especially looking at the watching back the video from KubeCon EU. So that you make a point of differentiating build from packaging, I think is really important. We have multiple things doing building, and we have a looser handle on how we're doing packaging today. So to tighten that up and conceptually have those separate and follow them with a qualify and a release step that are again distinct is a huge improvement that we need to make in our pipeline. The other one, the pattern that was talked about there in terms of GKE rolling things out in release channels, I think that that's something that we've all talked about wanting and needing, and how we deliver our outputs in SIG release. And I don't know, I like the idea of being able to, like, this pattern of declaring what you expect, and if it's there, you use it. And when I could see this tying into all sorts of validator tools on what we build and use, and those validators tying into promoters. And yeah, this could be the start of a pattern. If nothing else, having more of a component manifesting agreed upon system there around what is a component and how do you articulate its name and version dependencies, like in a machine readable form. We so need that. Those things I think are really useful patterns and things that we were already kind of talking about. So seeing a concrete example of something is really intriguing.
Cool. All right, well, let me know if you want me to, I don't know, have any questions. I can always field questions about that, or if there's any other follow-up you'd like to see from me.
Yeah, for sure. Really appreciate the demo.
Yeah, I think we got to figure out, should we get involved with the development, what makes sense, how we plumb things together, but I could see potentials there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks so much for showing up, Josh. Appreciate it.
Totally. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, moving right along. We've got Jeffy with some talk about the release notes website.
Hello. So as of 1.15, we are split brain between the changelog and the markdown file that is released, as well as the website. 1.16, we will be going completely to the website for just the changelog, the massive list of PRs that are typically categorized by SIG. However, we have all of these little dot releases in between 1.15 and 1.16. What should we do? I have ideas, but I kind of want to pose it to the group. And also, I'm still catching my breath from painting, because I actually painted during a SIG meeting. It wasn't a bike shed, though.
My gut tells me I would wait until the next major release to do any major changes, but that's just me being super conservative.
So I wouldn't consider this a major change, but currently if 1.15.1 drops, Anago, or whatever the tool is called these days, actually generates the 1.15.1 changelog. And shouldn't we mirror that into the release notes website as well?
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that we would want a delineation of, it's nice to have a roll up of what 1.15.0 is, and it would be nice to, as expected in most change logs, to have a delineation between the patch releases, right? So having a separate change log for that, I think, is fine personally. But
so now that we're following that along, who should generate that? should it be the release team of 115 continuing to do it for all the dot releases? Should it be the patch release manager? Could we potentially set it up so instead of Inago just generating the markdown, it also invokes the release notes tool, generates the JSON, and creates a PR?
Yeah, I would want no one to do it. I would want it to be handled by some tool. So if it's being handled in Inago right now, we should figure out how to maybe move it out.
So right now, the patch release process includes auto-generation of release notes of the Delta portion, and I think that ought to continue. The specific tool in doing so, I'm okay with that being changed. And for a patch release, it's trivial for us to trial something and show that it presents equivalent enough output.
I just want to say, I have no problem diving into and trying to automate this, but I have been told that there be dragons and opinions. So I do not want to step on anyone's toesies.
Right now, I mean, the main patch release flow includes like a one-line call out to generate those, I believe, or roughly. I mean, that there's an external tool and it generates some output. So I think that's not super scary dragons compared to some of the other things.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
All right, so just thinking of timing, for 115.1, we will probably still have to generate those manually, and I have no problem tackling that because it is just a one-liner, and that buys a little bit of time for us to try and actually do the right thing and get it into the release tooling so it's automated. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and we can compare, like we can run the current one and run an alternative one iteratively until we're happy with it. It doesn't have to actually happen at a release point. As soon as 115.0 ships, we will have a PR right after that that's merged onto the branch, and at that point you'll have something that a release notes, any of the release notes generators, because there are multiple today already, any of them could run and produce output, and we can compare on any given day at any given moment without making a release. So I feel like this is a safe thing to A/B test.
Awesome. All right, then that's me.
Cool. All right, so Linus is not available, but so he wanted to talk about the container image promoter and end-to-end testing for that. But we have Amy Chen on the line. So if Amy, you want to chat about that a little bit?
Hey, sorry, sorry, like I was like not really paying attention because I was like in the middle of a conversation. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So the container image promoter end-to-end testing.
Cool. So the process for that right now, let me turn on my video really quickly. All right. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm Amy. The situation for that is the image promoter, I think, is being blocked largely by E2E test. And so currently Linus Arbor, I think his last name is, and I are going to work together to put together a plan of what kind of criteria we need in order to call our E2E test done. But that is where we are right now. So it's in the pretty beginning stages. But yeah.
I think the other blocker we had, if you want to help Amy or Linus out on this, come on down to the Kate's Info working group. The other blocker was we have concerns like, what if something went wrong and the promoter accidentally deleted everything in the repos that it was trying to sync to? Like, what would our DR or recovery strategy be? And so thorough end-to-end testing is one prong of that approach. Figuring out how we might want to mitigate that is the other.
So,
sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it, Amy.
And something to add to that, that Justin Santa Barbara mentioned in our last infra working group meeting is that like this space is still very like malleable in the sense that we can add criteria, for instance, like restricting the abilities of the image promoter. So like if we wanted to restrict it to not being able to delete things, that is an option that we're allowed to discuss as well. or not allowed to, able to discuss. So yeah.
So continuing the call to action, kind of, the image, like the container image promoter right now is one of those things that will unlock a lot of work for everyone. So if you're interested or if you're able to help on this, please attend the working group Kate's Infra meetings.
And huge thanks to Amy for stepping up to contribute. It's very much appreciated. It's also kind of mutating into like the artifact image promoter at this point, because I think Justin has a PR to like add support for promoting arbitrary binaries. And then when we talk, but like when we talk about container promotion, right now I think it can only pull from gcr.io. There may be some specific APIs or something, and I would love it if somebody wants to figure out a way to have that talk to other registries, say the GitHub package registry or some
ACR
other
or Quay or
some other registry you might have credentials to push to. Yeah, super interested in making this viable for everybody.
And one more time, this is something that is critical to the project for everyone. Like, you know, I know for Cluster API, AWS, we want to be able to publish images in a CNCF owned repository. For Azure, we wanted to be able to do that too. Like that is blocked on Container Image Promoter right now. So again, if you're able to help with this, this is one of the biggest things that we can get done in the project in the near term. So.
A similar sort of discussion, going back to the deletions and the worry there, a similar discussion happened as we were talking about if and how we change our RPM and DEB repositories. And one of the proposals has been that we curate in channels sort of a nightly test and production set of packages. Most projects that I'm familiar with or products who do something like that seem to maybe give the appearance of deleting the older, no longer preferred things once something new has successfully promoted. But I feel like the pattern there is promote, validate, archive. And I wonder if that's something that we could follow in multiple tools or flows here, as opposed to deleting. But still, you'd have to prove that you safely moved the thing to a separate area versus delete it. But if the code definitely has no deletions, and you can trust that the move happened, because move is often copy and delete behind the scenes. I wonder if that gives us a little safety margin, or if there's been discussion in that direction.
So one thing I'll point out is that even with like test logs, that we're doing all the time, we TTL the stuff out just because you would consume near infinite storage. Like if we actually had very, very regular build of Kubernetes artifacts, that can actually be quite a bit of disk. So just something to consider.
I don't know that there's been concrete or documented discussion in that direction, Tim, but yeah, I think that's where we're all sort of thinking as a good stopgap, is to, like, let's not trust the robots to delete things. Bad things happen when that happens automatically. Maybe let's find a way to allow humans to sort of periodically review what is safe to delete.
And then we could potentially come up with something for tiered storage where we have a rsync no deletes that moves into extremely cheap, rarely accessed storage or something like that. But yeah, we could build sort of layers of safety.
That all sounds great. Like I will say, like, I'm really appreciative of folks like Tim Hawken whose paranoia meters are set up here, whereas I would rather push us through the FUD so that we can like merge and iterate and actually use this stuff. So I think like making sure we have that conversation and come to an agreement is great.
So we've actually had questions about, like, you know, can we with the tooling that exists today, at least for Debs, we've had questions about, like, oh, well, can I provide my own download link base, right? Or or choose where I push these things to, right? Part of the publishing process is not visible to us right now. So I've been working on like retooling some of it, which it's kind of in its infancy, but if you want to see that,
Yeah, I've noticed you and Tim are working on overlapping things. I will say to that point, like I don't know that we have an action item discreetly to talk about repositories for apt and Debian packages right now in the context of the working group. But like, if you need to stand one up, like come talk to us and we can make sure you have the space to do that. And I
We
think
have
it would be, oh, you do? Okay, great.
Yep.
Then awesome.
Yay! Progress.
Well, we have a playground test bucket in which to trial some directory
Yeah, because I
structures and
think
tools against.
the way we can unblock ourselves is to make sure you have the right playground so that you can demonstrate, hey, look, Ma, I can build a package all the way from source, and I can push it, and I can promote it. And then, then all it takes is figuring out the signing bit and flipping some things around. So let's make sure you have the room to develop everything you need to.
I think we have that now.
So I dropped a poll on Twitter just for funsies as we were releasing the 115 RC. Just ask a question to the group, like who is actually consuming alphas, betas, RCs of Kubernetes, like as it exists today, right? And over 50% of the poll said they didn't know they existed, right? So moving us to a point where we can enable people to consume pre-releases of Kubernetes, like brings us to a point where we can test, we can have more people testing this before it gets out the door. I think that's one of the goals, right?
So would this be in the context of reworking the Debian and RPM packages to build packages of alpha and beta builds?
Partly, yeah.
Because I think like what happens today, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we do actually cut alpha and beta builds, but we don't actually create Debian packages.
That's correct.
Right.
Or RPMs.
Right.
Okay. Because so there's that technical hurdle. I also feel like there's the social hurdle of, are you kidding me? Have you seen the release blocking dashboard lately? Why would I ever bother using that?
Yeah, there was a guy who said that on Twitter essentially, and I was like, "That's cool. That's not the question I asked." So moving on, he was like, "Why would I ever test in production?" I'm like, "Okay, all right. You are not the audience I was looking for."
Because Charity Majors says you have to, and she's right.
I literally linked a Charity Majors like article afterwards. Anyhow, I think it's awesome that we have movement in this. We're SIG leads have to sit down. I have a bunch of project boards up that we've put together. Some of the stuff is curated at this point. Some of it needs to be reworked for 116. I think release engineering is the name of the game for 116. Personally, like a personal focus of mine. I know it's the same on Tim and Caleb's mind. So yes, like if people are interested in release engineering work, come to us. There is a board full of things to do. We just need to figure out what to throw people at first.
Could we maybe like walk through that board at a later SIG release meeting, or is there like a dedicated meeting to going through that?
There will be a dedicated meeting for release engineering. I'm just waiting until we close the books on 115. I have to spin up the release, the licensing subproject meetings, as well as the release engineering subproject meetings. But there will be emails and all that stuff and doodles out to make sure that we find appropriate times for people to meet. So no, but soon.
Are you personally going to be running all of those meetings?
Not all of them, no.
Okay.
On the REL-eng side, I will definitely be helping on that. I've tried to get my plate mostly cleared for the foreseeable future just to crank some stuff out on that side of the house.
Yeah, so
That's my focus for the coming quarter.
Yeah, so for 116, I'm also going to be shadowing branch manager, the branch manager role, and working my way through it so I can exercise all of the tooling and poke holes in it. So. Because I love pain. All right. So Josh is up next with the, sorry, were there any other questions, comments, concerns about that topic in particular? All right. Okay. Josh is up next with the draft exit questionnaire for the release team mentoring.
Yeah. So as part of the whole, release team mentoring shadow pipeline, we want to actually see how we're doing. Particularly, like I have some questions where we had a couple of sections where none of the shadows were ready to step up and become leads this time around. And I want to find out whether there was, some kind of failure in process there, or whether it's just how things worked out. And so as part of this, I thought we should now start actually making it standard to ask both leads and shadows how the release went from a mentoring perspective. Like, we get a retro on how the release went from a release in Kubernetes perspective, but we don't really get a feeling of how did mentoring go, how did training people up go, et cetera, et cetera. So since this is going to be the first time we're going to be doing that, I put a link there to a draft set of questions in a document. So if this is something you care about and you have any feedback on that, please leave it as comments on that document. Otherwise, I'll be putting together this form tomorrow or Thursday and sending it out.
So, Josh, I know that you are going to be traveling soon.
Yeah, I'll be in Shanghai.
Okay, right. All right. So that will be out soon, but we'll also be doing something to keep in mind if you are a lead or you're moving into lead position for the next cycle. I think one of the focuses should be looking at people who are going to be willing to lead in the next cycle. That's one of the questions on the survey.
Yeah, and one of the other things, actually, if you look at the questionnaire in the survey, it occurs to me that this leads directly into stuff we should add in the docs in terms of what should shadows be doing. Because I don't think we've supplied a lot of guidance there to people who are new leads, particularly if they didn't come in via the shadow process. So some of the things that I'm asking about in terms of questions, like, if you look at those questions of did you do this or that or the other thing, these are things that we can actually put somewhere in the release team documentation to say, hey, these are all things shadows should be doing.
One of the things we also have only minimally documented on the roles is what knowledge or abilities somebody should come with, and maybe we could ask that of the shadows. Are there aspects of this role that you were underprepared for, and how were you able to overcome those, or could we have better prepared you?
So I think that, some of the stuff, as we were writing the handbooks in, 111, 112 or something, was left intentionally vague because we didn't want to alienate certain people. I think even with the release of this shadow application, one of the questions, I think, around like the docs handbook or something was, if you had to be, I think it specified that you had to be an org member to be a shadow, right? And I opened an issue for that and said, you do not have to be an org member to, we hope that you are moving towards that, right? But that's something that someone said they didn't feel like they could fill out the shadow application because they weren't already an org member. And I don't think that we want to get into the business of putting too many blockers in place to get people activated in this, right? We need to make it clear that we are mentoring people, or we are willing to mentor people into these positions.
I think that might be a good exit question, though, to see if people feel like they were adequately prepared to start shadowing.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the thing is, all of the handbooks do have a requirements section now. That was one of the things that I guided during the last cycle, is to make sure that requirement sections got added to all of them. But that doesn't mean that the list in that requirements section is actually good, if you follow me.
Oh, for sure. I've reviewed.
It might be too lenient. It might be too stringent. Not a bad idea to try to get feedback from some tuning from the existing shadows, right?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. When is that going out again?
I want to get it out before I leave for Shanghai, because if I don't get it out before I leave for Shanghai, then I might not get it out for another week and a half.
Okay.
So that would be Thursday at the latest.
Okay, so I will try to make sure I review that before then. Everyone on the call, everyone release team related, please take a moment to look at that so we can make sure it's high quality before we send it out.
So just a thought on a pattern of shadow engagement that I have enjoyed witnessing would be the shadow sort of looks at the responsibilities that the lead is handling and figures out which parts of those problems could be better solved by a tool or automation. I think Catherine did such a good job with that we sort of eliminated a whole bunch of human toil. And I feel like Jeff has done a phenomenal job of sort of transforming what release notes are. And I think that's sort of a great way of encouraging that pattern where like somebody, the buck has to stop with somebody and they kind of need to do the churn and the toil, but like there's also people who are dedicated to improving the process like as it's happening live.
Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Because this is just my count. Like, it's amazing that we're onboarding all these people and we're adding more people to the mix. But I also just feel like this is a lot of cooks in a kitchen, and the more like clarity and focus we can provide to this process, I feel like the more repeatable it will be. And I think like people showing up, willing to help out with that, are super appreciated.
I think that part of it is also we want to see some level of tenacity with our shadows, right? When I, not to like tell my own story, but like when I was shadowing Ihor, I basically joined the release team and said like, that is the guy who's been doing it consistently for 1,000 cycles and he has had no help, right? So that's the role I'm going to go do. And I basically looked at like, dude, what are you doing? Like, let's have a brain dump of what you're doing and tell me what I can take off your plate. Right, so I would want our shadows to be doing the same. Look at the shadow, like look at the role handbook and say, these are all things I can do. Can I do these instead of you? Can I look at this? Like I need to look at this process as well, right? And not feel that they just have to backseat drive, right? Or kind of hang out in the car without driving as well, right?
What I'm hearing Aaron say is that the goal in that though should be not that you actually take it on any longer than necessary for you to understand whether you can automate a portion of it. Like it's not about transferring the job from person to person, but each time we do that, spreading the knowledge so that the people can build more automation around it.
Yeah, I was making a separate point entirely. I didn't mean to imply. Yeah,
I get I have seen features leads have like an army of shadows go out and sort of in parallel engage with a bunch of things, and so that way the toil gets spread between people, which is cool. But like to the point of Ihor and his wonderful spreadsheet that he started way back when, we're still using a spreadsheet, right? How many of us really enjoy the experience of manually updating a spreadsheet and talking to humans and stuff?
Yeah,
Those are the sorts of things that I feel that if I look at the ideal engagement with a shadow, it's the areas where the lead has given the shadow sufficient space and understanding to, if they are so inclined, help improve the process right there. And by taking some of that tribal knowledge or whatever and encoding it into a tool that we can use, which is awesome. So like, thank you to the people that I mentioned. I think that's great. I just wanted to put that in there in terms of like, what do we evaluate as good or bad shadow engagements?
Awesome. All right. So last up, Lockie, I put a note in there for you, just to talk about any 116 things before we kick off that cycle.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Stephen. Basically, I just put a proposed schedule. If there's anybody who has an interest in looking at it and signing off on it, it's up there for conversation. And you've also put the shadow survey application is going to close out this Friday. So we're plugging it predominantly via Twitter, and I think I've seen some things in the Kubernetes Slack as well. So if you know anybody, please encourage them to sign up to be a shadow, and we will commence selection next week.
Yeah, we've got, from the applications I've reviewed already, we've got lots of strong candidates. So I'm super excited about 116.
63 applications to date.
Yep. All right, so we have just a few minutes for any topics that are not on the agenda. Anybody who, I think we should start doing introductions at the beginning for people who are not usually on the call. So if anyone wants to introduce themselves or mention something before we leave, feel free to. Don't be shy.
I can introduce myself, but since I'm gonna be talking tomorrow anyway at the well, or not tomorrow, on Thursday. But yeah, anyway, my name's Christine. I work at a cloud hosting company called Linode, and we're spinning up our own Kubernetes engine. So that's why I've been getting more involved in the SIGs in the community and Slack and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it.
Welcome, Christine. Like 12-year Linode customer here, something like that.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Cool.
So-
That's awesome. Cool. Well, nice to meet y'all.
I guess I'll follow Christine as well. Hey everyone, so I think I spoke earlier in the meeting. So my name's Amy Chen. I work at VMware. I'm a system software engineer here, and currently internally I target the upstream cluster API efforts. And that's also partially the reason why I'm working on helping unblock the image promoter, because we would love to have that functionality and not have to bother Justin Santa Barbara every time we want to make a release as well. So it's good to meet all of you.
Yeah, maybe I'll do the follow-up. Hi, it's Chris in the West Hotel with no Wi-Fi, so sorry, I need to save bandwidth. I've been poking around the COP space, but yeah, mirroring or shadowing Jared for the last release. So very exciting to also see the rebuild of all the release tooling at some point in time.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Anybody else that wants to say hi before we go? Okay, so stay tuned for updates on the what's happening with the 115 release. Hopefully we'll have something in the morning, morning Eastern time, maybe morning someone's time. I don't know. The release retrospective is going to be on Thursday during the community meeting. That's 1 p.m. Eastern. Any questions, ask the mailing list, SIG release, all that good stuff. Feel free to reach out to the leads personally if you need to. Have a great day and see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.